I wasn't supposed to hear it. I'd gone back to the dressing room to grab my grandmother's earrings, the something old, when I caught voices drifting from the other side of the wall. At first, I thought nothing of it, just nerves, chatter, laughter, but then I heard my name, and not in the way you want to be spoken about the night before your wedding. His voice was unmistakable, calm, cocky, full of himself. Harrison, my groom. He was laughing, telling his groomsmen I was just a temporary move, that marrying me was his shortcut to the top. I was nothing to him. He actually said those words. I froze. Like my body turned to stone while my heart melted into panic. She's loaded, he said. I'll get the company going, and when the time's right, I'll move on. She won't even see it coming. I couldn't breathe. My mind split in two, half screaming, half silent. I'd spent months planning this wedding, not just the event, but the life I thought came after. We had picked the venue together, tested cakes, wrote vows, or at least I thought we did. Turns out he planned it all, just not the way I imagined. Not for love, not for forever, but for profit. I was deceived, and it wasn't just the money. It was how little I meant, like I was just useful, replaceable. I backed away from the wall, barely able to think. My hands were shaking. She cried in silence. That was me, that exact moment. Alone, hidden, trying to keep it together as everything inside me shattered. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I didn't storm in and call it off. Not yet. I needed time to process, time to figure out who the hell this man really was, because it wasn't just betrayal, it was performance. Everything had been a role for him, the affection, the promises, even the way he looked at me, fake, so calculated. It hit me hard. He broke me first, but he didn't know he had, and maybe that was my first weapon, my silence. My silence was my answer. I wasn't gonna react, not right away. I was gonna think. Walked back to my suite, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. And for the first time, I didn't recognize the bride, but I recognized the fire. I remembered the girl who built things, who studied hard, who earned that trust fund. With generations of grit and grit alone, I wasn't some pawn in his game. He thought I would stay, but he didn't know me. I didn't sleep that night. I paced. I read old emails. I found the messages, late-night texts to women I didn't know, pictures, secrets, things I had ignored, because love does that to you. It blinds you, until suddenly it doesn't, until the truth comes out, and when it does, you can't unsee it. You can't unfeel it. That night, I felt every ounce of betrayal like shards under my skin, and as the sun rose, something in me shifted. Pain turned into power, hurt turned into clarity. I wasn't going to let him get away with it, but I wasn't going to scream, cry, or beg. Revenge isn't loud, it's quiet, strategic, like chess. And guess what? I'm good at chess. I've always been good at planning. Just like he was planning his future without me, I'd plan mine without him. And suddenly, the wedding wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a stage, and I had the leading role, but not the one he expected. I smiled that morning, greeted guests, thanked the florist, all while hiding a storm under my veil. He never saw it coming, and that's the thing about betrayal. When you flip it, it becomes revelation, truth, power, liberation. I looked around that day and thought, nobody believed her. That's how it goes, right? When a woman plays it calm, they assume she's weak. They forget that silence can be strategy. They forget that composure can be the beginning of a reckoning. And was I ready for that reckoning? But first, I had to let him say I do. You'd think after hearing something like that, I'd fall apart. Honestly, I almost did. But pain has this strange way of waking you up, like someone pouring cold water on your illusions. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed, gripping my phone, replaying the audio I'd secretly recorded from behind that thin wall. His words echoed like knives. He betrayed me. But if there's one thing about me, I don't collapse. I calculate. I didn't want revenge just for the drama. I wanted justice, and not just for me. I knew something darker was at play. Harrison wasn't just after my money. He was hiding something big. I remembered whispers during our engagement, weird gaps in his calendar, stories of betrayal from ex-business partners that I shrugged off. That was my mistake. But now, I was listening. First step, information. I started with the obvious. His laptop. He always kept it with him, but he made one mistake. He trusted me. He'd given me the password months ago, thinking I'd never need it. That night, I needed it. And there it was. Emails, offshore transfers, shady invoices to shell companies I'd never heard of. Fraud. Plain and simple. So I showed him the proof, but only to myself, for now. Next, I called Marcus, my old finance professor who'd gone on to work in corporate ethics. I told him what I found, and he didn't even hesitate. "We can build a case," he said, "but you've got to stay calm." Oh, the irony. Calm in the middle of chaos. But that's what I did. I played the part of the glowing bride while collecting every receipt, every transaction. He had no clue. She planned it all. I wasn't alone. I looped in Claire, his sister. She always liked me, and I always suspected she knew more than she let on. Turns out I was right. She confirmed what I feared. This wasn't his first scam. He'd burned people before. Women, friends, investors. I was deceived, just like them, but I wouldn't end up like them. Not this time. Not after everything he'd done. Together we traced the fraud trail. Claire had access to his accounts from a shared business venture. She printed what I couldn't reach and slipped them to me in a gift box, pretending it was a wedding gift. Inside, instead of pearls, were spreadsheets and wire logs. She exposed him, quietly, brilliantly. The weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just personal. This was criminal. I met with Marcus again. We compiled it all. Emails, account transfers, ghost companies, even messages where he talked about me, like I was a walking wallet. It was disgusting, but it was airtight. He was going down, and not just emotionally, legally. The truth came out, bit by bit, line by line. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't about heartbreak. This was about integrity, but I didn't rush. That's key. Retaliation without patience is just noise. I needed this to mean something, so I crafted my next move with precision. Not rage, not tears, just resolve. Like setting the final piece on a chessboard. He thought I would stay. He thought I'd cry, beg, maybe even forgive. That's what guilty men count on. Your silence, your softness. But this time, my silence was my answer. I looked at myself in the mirror again. Same dress hanging, same smile rehearsed. But inside, I was different, sharper. I wasn't just going to ruin his plan. I was going to rewrite the ending. And this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the architect of his downfall, of my freedom, of the truth. He never saw it coming, and I made sure he wouldn't, not until it was too late. Because the beauty of composure, it buys you time, it gives you power, and when you mix it with truth, with evidence, with courage, it becomes unstoppable. I didn't want to destroy him just to watch him burn. I wanted to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else again. And, with everything we had gathered, we were just getting started. The morning of my wedding, I opened my eyes to the sound of birds and betrayal. It was surreal, like waking up in a dream you don't want to finish. But I got up anyway. I moved with intention. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, but not from fear, from knowing what I was about to do. He broke me first, and now I was carrying that brokenness like armor. I laid out the dress, not because I loved it, but because it was part of the performance. A symbol, white satin, lace-lined, the very image of innocence. But underneath that beauty, I stitched something different. Hidden inside the hem were flash drives, receipts, printed emails. I had turned my wedding gown into a vault. If anyone ever looked close enough, they'd see. She planned it all. As the makeup artist worked on my face, I stared at my reflection and whispered inside, "You can cry later." There were no tears left anyway. She cried in silence, but not today. Today, she walked in silence, calm, poised, ready. I watched myself transform from heartbroken bride to something else entirely. A woman in control of her moment, her pain, and her narrative. The car ride to the church was a blur. People waved. Some even shouted, "You're glowing." Oh, if only they knew. I wasn't glowing with love. I was burning with clarity. My mother sat beside me, teary-eyed and proud, having no idea that her daughter wasn't heading to a wedding, but to a war. And that war would be won with truth, not tears. The truth came out, not with screaming, but with grace. I walked down that aisle like it was a runway to justice. Every camera snapped, every eye turned, and yet I kept my steps slow and deliberate. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any vows I could have spoken. My silence was my answer. I let them wonder, let him sweat. Harrison stood at the altar, smug and radiant, probably thinking I was still under his spell. He thought I would stay. I looked him in the eyes, and for a moment he smirked, like he'd already won. That smirk would haunt him soon enough. I held my bouquet tightly, not because I was nervous, but because inside was the trigger, a remote flash drive clicker. When the time came, all I had to do was press, so I showed him the proof. Not yet, but soon. Patience is a weapon when used. Right, the officiant began to speak. Words blurred, promises, unity, forever, all of it a lie. I let it wash over me like background noise. I wasn't marrying him. I was dismantling him, piece by piece. And the irony? He still didn't know. He still thought he had fooled me. I was nothing to him. And that's exactly what gave me power. He underestimated me completely. I held onto Claire's gaze from the front row. She nodded, a quiet confirmation that everything was set. The agents were nearby. My backup was ready. And in the crowd sat not just friends and family, but people who would become witnesses. People who would see the curtain fall on the performance of a lifetime. He never saw it coming, and that was the beauty of it all. I took one last deep breath. My hands no longer trembled. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, focused. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about showing people, especially women, that silence doesn't mean surrender, that betrayal doesn't mean defeat. He betrayed me, but I was still standing, dressed in white, draped in evidence, and moments away from rewriting my ending. And just as he reached for my hand, just as the audience leaned in for vows, I gently pulled away, not in fear, but in command. I cleared my throat. The room fell silent. Everyone thought I'd begin to speak words of love, but what came next wasn't a vow. It was a reckoning. I stood there, heart pounding beneath layers of lace and silk, knowing I was about to change everything. The church fell silent as I took a deep breath and turned toward the guests, holding the microphone instead of Harrison's hands. For a split second, he smiled at me, clueless, smug, already celebrating a victory he didn't deserve. Oh, if only he knew. He thought I would stay. He thought I would cry in silence. But that day, my silence was my answer. And my answer was war. I reached into the bodice of my dress and pulled out the folded stack of emails, color-coded and time-stamped. The first line I read out loud made the room freeze. Once the trust fund hits, I'll move her out, clean and quiet. Gasps echoed like thunder through the pews. Harrison's smirk cracked. He had no idea I'd found the messages, or that I'd been planning this reveal for weeks. She planned it all, every second, every word, every thread of betrayal, sewn into my white dress like daggers disguised as pearls. People say betrayal hits you like a punch, but it felt more like drowning while smiling. I'd smiled for weeks, all while knowing I was nothing to him, just a walking vault, just a means to an end. I wanted them to hear it, not just what he did, but who he really was. And as I read each message, each transfer, each lie he whispered behind my back, I watched his carefully built world crumble like wet paper. He never saw it coming. Some guests looked away, some whispered in horror, and others stared at Harrison with pure disbelief. His sister Claire covered her mouth. His mother looked like she'd aged 10 years in a minute. Nobody believed her. I imagined she was thinking. But now, the truth came out. And once it does, it doesn't crawl. It explodes. I watched them shift in their seats, realizing the wedding they came to witness had become something else entirely. When he tried to grab the mic, I stepped back. I wasn't done. I wasn't just exposing emails. I was exposing him, his theft, his affairs, his plans. I laid them bare, layer by layer, like peeling off a rotten fruit to show everyone the mold underneath. She exposed him without blinking. And when he said, "Stop it, please," I didn't flinch. He broke me first, I whispered into the mic, so I showed him the proof. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my power. There's something fierce about truth. It doesn't beg, it commands. I spoke not as a woman scorned, but as a woman awakened. And maybe that's what scared him most. Because when someone thinks you're broken beyond repair, they never expect you to rise, steady and calm, with their secrets in your hands. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. They shook from the adrenaline of standing up for myself, out loud, with the world watching. My silence had protected him for too long, but now, every whispered betrayal had a microphone. Every message he wrote in confidence became a confession read before God and everyone he ever fooled. I was deceived, yes, but I wasn't destroyed. Harrison's voice cracked as he tried to explain. It's not what it looks like. Classic, predictable, and completely useless. Because by that point, nothing he said could change the fact that I had receipts, names, dates, numbers. Every weapon he used against me turned right back at him. I could see it in his eyes. Regret not for what he did, but for getting caught. The illusion was over. The lies were dead. And justice? Well, justice was just getting started. I remember looking at his mother as I read the final line. She's soft. She'll never fight back. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from shame, but from the shock of who her son truly was. Sometimes, the people closest to the monster are the last to see it. But that moment woke everyone up. The guests, his family, even Claire. He betrayed me, yes, but now, they all knew it too. I paused, letting the silence settle like dust after an earthquake. The air felt thick, charged, electric. I had more in store. This wasn't the end, not even close, because just outside the doors, the real storm was waiting to blow the roof off his lies completely. No one really prepares you for the moment your pain becomes public spectacle. I stood there, barely breathing, watching Harrison's face twist from smug confidence to sheer panic. The second I said, "I have more," his eyes darted toward the crowd. He knew something was coming, but he never saw it coming like this. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break hearts, it opens floodgates. And oh, did the flood come. He thought I would stay quiet, like I had so many times before. But my silence was my answer, and this time, it screamed. Seconds after I finished reading the last line of the email where he admitted to embezzlement, 2 sharp-dressed SEC agents stepped forward. Their presence was like thunder cracking through stained glass, Gasps echoed through the church. Harrison's mother turned pale. His groomsmen looked stunned, and I didn't flinch. I had waited for this exact beat, timed it down to the breath. He betrayed me, yes. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was about truth, justice, and ending the cycle of deception. As the agents pulled out a warrant, Harrison lunged toward me like a man possessed. It was like watching a mask fall off in real time. This wasn't the charming fiancé I'd once loved. This was the predator behind the curtain. I didn't move. I simply reached into my bouquet, pulled out the remaining documents, and let them scatter like broken vows. Pages flew everywhere. I saw one land right at his sister Claire's feet. She picked it up with shaking hands, read it, and stepped back from him, so I showed him the proof. All of it, right there, in front of everyone who thought they knew him, the accountant he'd paid off, the ghost company he funneled the money through, the names, the signatures, the wire transfers, every piece of the puzzle laid bare. She exposed him. That's what the headlines would say later. But I wasn't trying to be famous. I just wanted my dignity back. I wanted him to know that the woman he dismissed as temporary was the one who brought him down. Security came next. Not for me, for him. They escorted him out as he screamed that he loved me, that I misunderstood, that he begged me to come back. I didn't even blink. I stood among shredded petals and broken dreams, calm as a queen at the end of a war. He broke me first, and that's why this moment wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost, piece by painful piece. Betrayal teaches you to become your own armor. Claire followed the officers, eyes still glassy, lips trembling. I could tell she was wrestling with the truth, but even in that chaos, she looked at me, not with hatred, but with something else. Maybe understanding, maybe respect, maybe sorrow that her brother wasn't the man she believed he was. That's the thing about secrets. They don't stay buried forever. Eventually, the truth comes out, and when it does, it leaves nothing untouched. People whispered. Phones flashed. I knew this would go viral before I even stepped outside. That's why I'd hired 2 photographers to capture everything. Let them document this downfall. Let the world see that not every bride walks down the aisle in bliss. Some do it in battle and win. Every tear I'd cried in silence was now vindicated. I was nothing to him? Fine. But now he was nothing to the empire he tried to build on my back. I walked outside while the sirens still flashed. The wind caught my veil, almost lifting it off. I didn't stop it. Let it go. I wasn't hiding anymore. The irony? This was the exact church I dreamed of marrying in since I was 10. And here I was, still in white, still radiant, but walking. Out not as a wife, but as a woman reborn through betrayal. I didn't crumble. I conquered. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The reporters were already waiting. Someone asked if I had a comment. I looked them dead in the eye and simply said, "He thought I would stay." Then I turned and walked away. That sentence held centuries of silence, grief, strength, and resolve. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to explain. The world saw it. He planned it all, sure, but so did I. Except my plan wasn't for gain. It was for freedom, and as I stepped into the waiting car, veil gone, hands still shaking slightly, I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, it did, but because I had made it through the storm without losing myself. That was the real revenge, showing up, fully me, fully aware, and fully done. And what came next? Well, that was a story even betrayal couldn't stop from unfolding. The moment I stepped out of that church, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Cameras clicked like a symphony of judgment and curiosity. I could feel 1,000 eyes on me, but for once, I didn't shrink. I didn't hide. I walked straight into the chaos, like it was a runway made of ruin. It was poetic, really. He broke me first, and now the world would watch as I rebuilt myself, brick by blazing brick, right in front of them. I wasn't just the girl he betrayed. I was the woman who showed up and burned the whole damn lie to the ground. It spread faster than I expected. Within hours, clips were circulating everywhere. TikTok edits with captions like, "She exposed him," and "The bride who fought back." People dissected every angle, every expression, every word I spoke before the arrest. Some called me savage, others called me iconic. But what mattered most was that I wasn't invisible anymore. She cried in silence for too long, and now she was being heard by millions. It was strange, surreal, and powerful all at once. Harrison's downfall became public property. Every news outlet picked it up. Headlines read, "Groom arrested mid-wedding," bride outs fiancé's fraud in front of guests, and my personal favorite, justice in white heels. They didn't know the whole story, but they didn't have to. All they needed to see was the result. Me, standing tall, while he was dragged away by his own lies. I found the messages, I followed the trail, and I made sure the world knew what betrayal really looked like. The internet can be brutal, but in this case it was a strange kind of balm. Strangers from across the world reached out. Some said I inspired them to walk away. Others said they were still trapped, still deceived, but now had hope. That was unexpected. I never wanted fame. I just wanted to stop hurting. But when your pain turns into someone else's permission to heal, that's when it starts to mean something more. That's when it becomes legacy. Even people who once doubted me started changing their tune. Guests who looked at me with pity or skepticism during the ceremony were now praising my courage online. Harrison's ex-business partners, suddenly aware of what they narrowly avoided, began investigating their own contracts. And Claire, his sister, posted a single photo the moment she read one of the scattered pages. Her caption, "The truth," came out. That hit me harder than I expected. Behind every viral moment is a quiet, aching truth. This all still hurt. Just because I smiled for the cameras didn't mean I was okay. I had spent months orchestrating this, but now the adrenaline was fading, and I was left with the rawness of everything he did. He deceived me. I was nothing to him. That thought still echoed in my mind late at night. But the difference now? I wasn't alone with it. The world was watching and listening. People started calling me the woman who weaponized her wedding. That made me laugh. Not because it wasn't true, but because they didn't realize how much it took to get there. The nights I stayed, up crying, the fear of no one believing me, the moments I doubted if revenge was even worth it. But you know what? It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. It was reclaiming my voice after he tried to drown it in charm and manipulation. The photos from that day went viral. One especially, me, veil flying behind me, documents in hand, expression calm but fierce. It became a symbol for something bigger than just heartbreak. It became about power, choice, truth, for every woman who ever stayed too long, for every "she finally left" whispered in shame. I didn't walk away quietly. I walked out louder than he ever imagined I could be. Ironically, the dress I wore that day wasn't the one I picked for love. It was the one I picked for war. White, yes, but sharp, structured, like armor disguised as elegance. Funny how clothes can become statements. That day, mine said, "I'm done hiding." My silence was my answer, and now the whole world had heard it loud and clear. And if anyone wondered whether I regretted it, let's just say this: I'd do it all, over again. Because while betrayal hurts, silence kills, and I refused to be buried under what he did to me. Instead, I let the truth rise, and as millions watched it unfold, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't the end. It was the middle of something much bigger. And what came next? Oh, just wait. After the noise died down and the cameras moved on, there was this strange, echoing silence. Not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that dares you to rebuild. And trust me, I stood there in the wreckage of my own life, staring at the ashes, and thought, well, now what? But here's the thing about ruin. It's a blank slate in disguise. The wedding didn't mark my beginning with him. It marked the rebirth of me. And this time, I was building everything from truth, not illusion. I started small. I made tea each morning and watched the sun rise, reminding myself that light still existed. I deleted old emails, blocked numbers, cried, sometimes with rage, sometimes from grief. But with every tear, something else left me too. The weight of pretending. I no longer had to fake being okay, because he broke me first, and now I had permission to heal without hiding. No more explaining, no more justifying, just space, honest, sacred space. One day, I sat with my laptop and opened a blank document. No title, no plan, just heart. I started writing everything. How I found the messages, how I played dumb while planning his public downfall, how he begged her to come back through friends and silence. But more than that, I wrote about how I survived, how I was deceived, yes, but how I chose not to stay deceived. And somehow, that messy, raw document became the blueprint for something more. Within a few months, I turned it into a framework. Not just a story, but a method. A way to help other women in high-stakes relationships reclaim power. I launched a consulting firm. People thought I was crazy. Who would want guidance from a woman who let her groom get arrested mid-ceremony? But guess what? Turns out, stories of betrayal connect more than success stories ever could. She exposed him, became a war cry, a marketing tagline, and a mission. Clients came pouring in. Not just women, but whistleblowers, corporate execs, even lawyers looking for ethics strategy. I taught them what I learned the hard way. When the truth comes out, it's messy, but also liberating. I created ethics audits, anonymous reporting protocols, emotional safety systems. Suddenly, my greatest pain became a profitable service. My firm stood for transparency, not just in business, but in life. But I didn't stop there. I founded a nonprofit, an integrity foundation. The goal? To fund women-led startups and support victims of financial and emotional abuse. For every person nobody believed, we created safe paths forward. And I named the initiative after something that stayed with me, the Silent Answer Project. Because sometimes, my silence was my answer, and other times, my voice had to be loud enough to wake the world up. Every day, I'd get messages. Because of you, I left. He thought I would stay, but I didn't. Your story saved my life. And those words, they healed me in ways no courtroom ever could. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted redemption. And with every woman I helped walk away, with every broken truth we helped piece together, I was slowly rewriting what forever meant, not tied to a person, but to purpose. People often asked if I missed Harrison, if I missed the life we almost had. And I'll be honest, sometimes I missed the idea of him, the fantasy, the version I thought I loved. But reality, he betrayed me, and I was nothing to him beyond access and appearances. You don't mourn someone like that. You outgrow them. You use the ashes of their lies to plant seeds for your next chapter. It wasn't about pretending to be over it. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without reopening the wound. So I built a life that reminded me of who I became, not who I lost. I spoke on panels, wrote for Forbes, launched a podcast, all while still waking up sometimes with a lump in my throat, because betrayal leaves echoes. But you learn to sing louder than the silence it leaves behind. And just when I thought that was the full circle, something happened that caught me completely off guard, something small, intimate, but deeply symbolic. It reminded me that rebirth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper from the last person you'd expect. And just like that, the next chapter began to write itself. It's strange, isn't it? How life can throw you into a whirlwind of chaos. And then, just when you think you're falling apart, someone unexpected reaches out and offers you a lifeline. That's exactly what happened the day Diana, Harrison's mother, approached me after the scandal was all over. I won't lie to you. When I first saw her, I felt a mix of confusion and anger. After all, this was the woman who raised the man who almost destroyed me. Yet here she was, standing before me, holding something precious. She handed me a velvet box, small, but heavy with meaning. I didn't understand what was happening at first. The last time I saw her, she was defending Harrison, justifying every betrayal, every lie. Yet, in this moment, she seemed different. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even apologizing. Instead, she offered me the family pearls. You deserve them, she said, her voice steady. Not because of blood or loyalty, but because you chose truth. Because you chose yourself. Those words stopped me in my tracks. I thought I knew everything about betrayal and loyalty by that point. But what she gave me wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of respect. The pearls, they represented something deeper. Diana wasn't just offering me a family heirloom. She was offering a quiet acknowledgement of my strength. She was recognizing that in a world that thrives on deception, I had the courage to walk away, to expose the truth. The moment wasn't just hers to give, though. It was mine to accept or to reject. And for a long time, I wrestled with that decision. How could I accept something from the woman who raised the man who shattered my life? But then, something shifted. I remembered she planned it all, in a way. She had always known who her son was, what he was capable of, and in the end, I wasn't. The one who needed to be healed. It was her. She had to reconcile her own demons, and I could either be the person who helped her along that path, or the one who refused to acknowledge the complexity of it all. And there, standing in front of me, was a woman who finally saw me for who I truly was. Not the woman who'd been tricked, not the one who had been caught in a whirlwind of lies, but the one who had rebuilt herself from the wreckage, the one who had chosen truth when everyone else was too afraid to. It was a moment of connection, a moment where, despite everything that had happened, we were both women who understood something vital, the cost of loyalty and the price of truth. In Rainham. The days that followed, Diana and I kept in touch, in a way I never expected. I think she needed me, in her own way, just as much as I needed her. There was something undeniably powerful about the bond that grew between us, the quiet understanding. She didn't need to explain her actions to me. She had already offered her peace in the form of those pearls, and I had accepted it, not because I was ready to forgive Harrison, but because I had learned to forgive myself. In a world that teaches us to cut ties, to walk away without looking back, this felt different. This felt like closure, not just for me, but for Diana too. It was a reminder that people are rarely just good or bad. They are complicated. And while Harrison's actions would never change, Diana's gesture was an acknowledgement that, at least for her, she had seen what truly mattered. And perhaps, in some small way, she too was trying to find redemption. It wasn't easy. The weeks that followed were filled with conversations about family, about legacy, about the pieces we each carried. And though I couldn't deny that my journey had been filled with pain, I also couldn't ignore the beauty that was beginning to emerge from it. Claire, Harrison's sister, started reaching out more often too, and slowly, very slowly, a kind of sisterhood started to form between us. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even comfortable at times, but it was real. That's the thing about life though. You don't always get to choose your family, but sometimes, in the most unexpected places, you find a kind of kinship that heals you. The pearls Diana gave me were a symbol of that healing, of finding connection in the unlikeliest of places. They weren't just a piece of jewelry, they were a reminder of how far I'd come, and more importantly, they were a reminder of how far I still had to go. And as I stood there with them, knowing that my journey was far from over, I couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, this was the true gift, the one that mattered most. You know, it's funny how people think that once a scandal like mine blows over, everything goes back to normal. That's what they expect, right? That life will just fall back into place, and we'll pick up the pieces and pretend nothing ever happened. But here's the truth. Life after a betrayal, especially one so public, is never the same. It's not about moving on in the traditional sense. It's about carving out a new path, one that no longer relies on who you were or who you thought you could trust. In the aftermath, I couldn't just go back to the way things were. Harrison's arrest, the chaos, the exposure, it was all too much. And yet, I realized something important. That wasn't the end of my story. In fact, it was only the beginning. I'd spent so much time tied to the idea of revenge, of righting the wrongs done to me, but then it hit me. Revenge wasn't the goal. What I needed was purpose, a reason to move forward that was bigger than anything Harrison could have ever taken from me. So, I got to work. I didn't just sit around waiting for things to go back to normal. I made a conscious decision to create something out of the ashes of my past. That's when I launched my consulting firm, a company built on ethics, accountability, and integrity. You might be wondering why. Why go through the trouble of building something new, especially after everything had fallen apart? And my answer is simple, because he never saw it coming. Harrison, his family, everyone involved, they all thought I would crumble. They thought I'd fall apart, disappear, or drown in the chaos they'd created. But what they didn't know was that I had something far stronger than they realized, the truth. And I wasn't going to let that go to waste. I wasn't going to let anyone's betrayal define me. I was going to redefine myself, and I was going to do it on my terms. As I built my firm, I made it clear from the start what my values were: transparency, honesty, and a commitment to uncovering the truth. It wasn't just about business. It was about showing the world that integrity still mattered, that standing up for what was right was worth the fight. Slowly, people began to take notice. Clients, partners, and even former colleagues reached out, inspired by my resilience and my unwavering commitment to accountability. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was helping others rebuild theirs. The more I did, the more I realized that the true power in my journey wasn't in the revenge. It wasn't in watching Harrison get what he deserved. No, the real power came from the work, from turning my pain into purpose. And when people asked me what the turning point was, I told them. It was the moment I stopped focusing on what happened to me and started focusing on what I could do with it. That's the thing about betrayal. It can feel like it shatters you, like it leaves you with nothing. But in reality, it can be the very thing that pushes you into your power. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything almost crushed me, but with each victory, no matter how small, I started to see the path ahead more clearly. I began to understand that the most beautiful thing that could come from pain was growth. Growth that didn't just heal the wounds, but transformed them into something extraordinary. And so as I walked forward, I didn't look back. I didn't look back to Harrison, or the lies, or the betrayal. I looked forward to a future that was mine to create, to shape, to mold. And the truth was clear. He broke me first, but it was my strength that rebuilt me. It wasn't revenge that kept me going. It was purpose. And that was something no one could take from me. In time, my work began to reach beyond just my firm. I became a voice for those who had been betrayed, those who felt like their worlds had fallen apart. I spoke at conferences, led workshops, and helped others find their own way back from the devastation of deception. I realized that this mission to teach, to help, to empower, was the true legacy of my journey. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the healing, the change. But as I moved forward, I knew this was just one chapter. Because with every step, A new path was unfolding before me, one that was fueled not by bitterness, but by a deep, unwavering commitment to creating something better, something bigger. And even as I built this new future, I couldn't help but wonder, what would have happened if I had chosen a different path? Would I have still found this strength? Or was this new me something I never would have discovered without that betrayal? Looking back, I can't even recognize the person I was before all of this happened. The woman who walked down that aisle, the one who believed in love and trust. She feels so distant now. I've evolved into someone who isn't defined by the past, but by the lessons learned along the way. In fact, I can't help but laugh sometimes when I think about how I ever thought I'd stay the same. Life has a way of changing you in ways you never expect. And for me, that change was nothing short of iconic. When I first started out, I never imagined that I would become this woman, the one who stands tall in front of audiences, teaching business, ethics, and integrity. I didn't think that my journey, the pain and the struggle, would one day inspire thousands. But here I am, not just a survivor, but a force for change, a symbol of what happens when you choose not to stay silent, not to let betrayal be the final chapter in your story. No, it was never just about revenge. It was about making my mark in a world that sometimes feels so willing to overlook the truth. One of the most incredible parts of my transformation is how people see me now. The woman who was once nothing to him. The woman who he thought would stay and take the abuse. She's gone. That version of me is dead and gone, and in her place stands a woman who knows exactly who she is, what she's worth, and what she's capable of. And trust me when I say, it's not just a new confidence, it's a new power. People began to approach me for advice, for guidance. I became a mentor, a consultant, a teacher, not just in the business world, but in life, in resilience, in overcoming the kind of pain that threatens to swallow you whole. It's humbling, really. And even though part of me thought I might never escape the shadows of what Harrison did to me, here I am, not just stepping into the light, but owning it. But even through all the success, there's a piece of me that hasn't changed. I still have that burning desire to help others, to reach out to those who've been betrayed, to show them that they can rise up from the ashes of their past and create something powerful, something iconic. I've made it my mission to inspire others to take that first step, to stop being a victim of circumstance and start being the hero of their own story. I've realized that when the truth comes out, when you face the pain head on and refuse to let it define you, you can become something greater than you ever imagined. I didn't just survive Harrison's betrayal, I thrived because of it. It's a part of my story, sure, but it's no longer the defining chapter. That's the beauty of transformation. You get to rewrite your narrative. And the new chapter? It's nothing short of legendary. I've learned that true power doesn't come from fighting fire with fire. It comes from standing firm in your values, your truth, and your integrity. It's about knowing that you can rise from the wreckage, that even after everything falls apart, you can still build something better, something that not only stands the test of time, but changes the world around you. As my influence grew, so did my responsibility. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every single person who had been betrayed, who had lost their way. I've made it my life's work to be that beacon for them, to show them that they don't have to stay in the dark, that they don't have to let the betrayal of others dictate their worth. And let me tell you, there is no greater feeling than knowing you're making a difference in someone else's life. In the years that followed, I built more than just a career. I built a legacy of honesty, of truth, of standing up for what's right, even when the world tries to pull you down. I became known as someone who didn't just talk the talk, but who walked the walk. Someone who turned betrayal into a weapon of empowerment. But I'll be honest with you, even now, when I look at the person I've become, there's a part of me that can't help but feel proud. Proud of how far I've come, of how much I've changed, and of how many lives I've touched. And I know that I'll keep evolving. This isn't the end for me. It's just another chapter in a story that's still being written. As I sit here reflecting, I realize that I don't just want to be remembered as the woman who turned betrayal into business. I want to be remembered as someone who showed others that no matter how many times life tries to knock you down, you can always rise again. And when you do, you'll be unstoppable. And so, my journey continues. Not for revenge, not for the past, but for the future. A future where I can be a symbol of strength, of resilience, and of the incredible transformation that happens when you refuse to stay silent, when you refuse to let betrayal break you.